Looking at our world from a theological perspective. This is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Good evening, everyone. It is Friday, May the 14th, 2021. I'm going to pull the microphone a little closer to me, so I apologize. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. It is Friday evening, May the 14th, 2021. It is 6:37 p.m. Central Time, and here I am in the sanctuary of Victory Baptist Church. You know where we are, in the middle of nowhere, Texas. And we are going to turn our attention back to Psalm chapter 4, all right? Psalm chapter 4. We did a Bible study exercise a few days ago on Psalm chapter 4, and this was one of those situations where a listener really just, they probably didn't even know this, but it felt like they just knew that it was the right time to help me out, because sometimes when I'm trying to do things like the Bible study exercise or a lot of the different things I try to do, sometimes it can become very discouraging because, again, you have to just realize this. Hey, if I turn on this microphone, talk about what's going on in the Southern Baptist Convention or what's going on in the United Methodist, or I'm talking about Israel, Palestine, police shootings, if I talk about anything going on within the culture, that's always going to generate email, response, communication, discussion, debate. Boom. I know it. It's going to happen. But so many times when I turn on the microphone to say, let's study the Bible. Let's do a Bible study exercise. Well, I'll do part of the study. I'll hand over the rest to you. Then you'll contact me with the portion you did, which then will lead to a discussion, which will hopefully lead to you being, to encouragement and exhortation. And that will be biblical. That will be beneficial. It will be wonderful. It'll be great. Well, guess what? A lot of times that does not happen. The Bible study exercises or other things like that tend to definitely receive the fewest number of emails. Sometimes it's completely silent, which can then make me go, wait a minute, what am I doing here? What should I do? Because I don't want to just go back to talking about the news. I don't want to just go back to that, because we need a healthy balance. So right about the time I start thinking, I don't even know if I'm accomplishing anything, I get an email from one person saying, hey, I appreciate the Bible study exercises. Here are the steps I take. And that was very encouraging. And then someone, I'm going to give her name, by the name of Twyla, went and she went all in. She went all in on Psalm chapter 4. She took what I did and went a whole lot further, did everything I asked. And it was so encouraging when I saw it. I was like, yes, thank you. Now, again, I have to point this out. The two individuals who talked about the Bible study exercise just happened to be, drumroll please, female. Yes. Now, I know I made a comment about females and studying the Bible, reading the Bible, and I think I offended a lot of men with that. But it wasn't to offend men. It was just simply to say, here's my experience. And remember, in that episode, there was a man who was listening who was talking about what he has seen in his situation and being a Sunday school teacher. Remember, even he said there's no question about it. Women take the most notes, which again, just think about it logically. If women are going to church and women are taking the most notes, they're the ones who A, are going to retain the most, and B, they're probably the ones who can then engage in an actual conversation about what was preached and can actually talk about it. That's not to offend men. Don't get offended at me. You can fix that easily. Start taking notes and talk about the Bible, okay? And study the Bible and talk about doctrine and talk about theology and talk about church history. Sometimes men get very offended, but there was no need for men to be offended. I was simply talking about, hey, women are being ordained in ministry. I wonder why. Well, if you look at sometimes what's going on in the church, sometimes it seems that the women are more theologically minded, more likely to be reading books, studying the Bible, talking about the Bible than the men. That's just an observation. If you disagree, you can disagree, but the main thing is don't disagree. Demonstrate the opposite. just demonstrate the opposite. And so I just found it interesting that it was women who contacted me in regards to a Bible study exercise. It's just, I find that humorous. And to look at what Twyla did is, once again, an example of a woman digging into Scripture, outlining Scripture, trying to interpret Scripture, and it's exactly that's what I long for the Bible study exercises, is to get people digging into the Scripture. So let's go through Psalm chapter 4 quickly. This is the outline for what we're going to try to do today. I'm going to try to remind you briefly of what I gave you and kind of my outline. I'm going to show you what Twyla did. I'm going to then show you how I tried to finish up the chapter, my interpretive finish of the chapter, and then we're going to take a sermon that was preached at a church for a Sunday service, and we're going to look at how they handled Psalm chapter 4. Now, I know I just talked about using other content and not hopefully being copyright infringement. I think I have the name of the church, so I'm going to try to give the name of the church and the name of the pastor. I said that I don't typically do that because remember when this is a sermon, I just went to the Edify Christian Podcast app and put in Psalm 4, and this was the first one that showed up. All right. So it's random. That means I haven't listened to it. I don't know where it's going to go, but I thought it would be interesting to hear how other people handle this psalm. All right. Psalm chapter 4. So let's go through this. All right. Psalm chapter 4. Now, I don't have this Bible that I have does not have the chapter heading, but I'm going from memory, I believe this chapter heading for Psalm chapter 4 is it's a Psalm of David, and I think it's in fact, let me see. I can probably just find it. I don't want to misquote this. I didn't realize I had I try to have a Bible. I always try to have one Bible that doesn't have any notes, any helps, doesn't have anything. Let me go here so that I can state it correctly. Because the last thing I want to do is get something wrong. About the Bible. After the day that I've had. All right, here we go. I definitely don't want to do that. All right, here we go. Let's go to BibleHub.com. Yes, here we go. For the director of music, this is how one translation gives us the chapter heading. For the director of music with stringed instruments, a Psalm of David. And a Berean Study Bible, for the choir master with stringed instruments, a Psalm of David. And the King James says, to the chief musician on Neginoth, I think is exactly how you say that if I remember correctly, a Psalm of David. Neginoth or Neginoth means a stringed instruments. That's what it refers to. So it's to the chief musician on stringed instruments, a Psalm of David. So Psalm chapter 4 is a Psalm of David that was meant to be basically sung and accompanied on stringed instruments. So that means we have a song here, basically lyrics, poetry, but it's also included in the Bible, so makes it inspired scripture. Now, the fact that it's to be sung, we have to kind of remember that as we're trying to interpret it. All right, but here we go. Psalm chapter 4, verse 1. Hear me when I call, O God, of my righteousness. Thou hast enlarged me when I was in distress. Have mercy upon me and hear my prayer. Now, I approach chapter 4, verse 1, trying to build our outline, try to remind you. I may state it a little differently, so that's okay because I've been working on the psalm now for days. Psalm chapter 4, verse 1, I kind of see this as David's plea. He's pleading with God to hear him. He says it twice in verse 1, Psalm chapter 4, verse 1, hear me when I call, O God, at the end of it, and hear my prayer. He pleads to God to hear his prayer. He pleads to God, in some ways you could say, you have enlarged me when I was in distress. Have mercy upon me. You could say he pleads for God to hear him, and he pleads for God to do for him what he's done for him in the past. The mercy that he's extended to him in the past, he's asking for that past mercy to be present in the now, in the here and now. So you could say there's two pleas. He pleads for God to hear him, and he pleads for God for past mercy to be made present. And that past mercy was God enlarged him when he was in distress. In the past, when he felt blocked in or locked in or trapped, God enlarged him and in a sense gave him a way out of that escape. Right? We talked about this before in part 1. You can go back and listen. So there's David's plea. He pleads for two things. Verse 2, O ye sons of men, how long will you turn my glory into shame? How long will you love vanity and seek after leasing Selah? Now here in verse 2, I have David's complaint. He has a complaint against the sons of men. He has a complaint against the sons of men, and there's really three parts to his complaint. I'm going to bring this up in a number of translations. There's three parts to his complaint. They're very simple. They're very straightforward. Number one, how long will you turn my glory into shame? Now, if this is David, there's, in a sense, my glory, my reputation, how I'm known, you've turned it into shame. Maybe they're gossiping, maybe they're slandering, maybe they're making accusations. He's bothered. How long? He's got a complaint against the sons of men, and the first complaint is, how long will you turn my glory into shame? A number of translations, they read it, this is how they translate it, a number of different translations. How long will you people turn my glory into shame? All right, that doesn't help a lot. New Living Translation. How long will you people ruin my reputation? Right? There you go. How long shall my honor be turned into shame? Or Berean Study Bible. How long will my honor be maligned? These people are destroying his reputation. They're maligning his character. They're turning glory into shame and dishonor. And he is upset. That is his complaint. That is it. Lord, hear me. What does he need to hear? His complaint. First complaint, they're turning his glory into shame. Second complaint, how long will you love vanity? How long will you love vanity? Another one, some other translations, how long will you love delusions? Another one, how long will you make groundless accusations? Now, that's interesting, the New Living Translation, because it's almost like, how long will you love vanity? In other words, how long are you going to continue to love vanity, making empty, meaningless, groundless accusations? They attach it to the first part, okay? But these people love meaninglessness, they love emptiness, and maybe that means that they're giving meaningless, empty accusations. We didn't talk about that last time, but I think that's interesting. How long will you love vain words? There you go. How long will you love vain words? Another translation. How long will you love vain words? How long will you love vanity? Another one. How long will you love vanity? How long will you love worthlessness? All right. So the bottom line is, hey, David, he pleads for God for two things, to hear his prayer and for him to give him the past mercies in the present. Then he offers his complaint. His first complaint is, how long are these people going to continue to destroy my reputation, turn my glory into shame? And number two, how long are you, sons of men? He seems to be directing it directly at the sons of men. How long are you going to love vanity? And it appears possibly that we can understand this. You demonstrate your love for vanity by using all of these meaningless words, empty accusations against me, right? Third complaint he has against them. The third one, according to the King James, is how long will you love, and basically, how long will you seek after leasing? Leasing, leasing. Now, the other translations handle leasing a couple of ways. Seek false gods, continue in your lies, seek after lies, seek after lies. King James, seek after leasing. The New King James, seek falsehood. Strive for a lie. So how long? So his complaint against the sons of men is that they are turning his glory into shame. Number two, they love vanity. And number three, they seek after lies and falsehood. And you could argue that the lies and falsehood and vanity is what's being used to bring shame to his honor, to turn his glory into shame, right? So there's his complaint. Now, we can ask ourselves a question. It would seem to me he's not obviously currently speaking to the sons of men, because this is made into like a song or a psalm. It seems like it's best to understand that he's bringing his complaint to God. Hey, Lord, hear my prayer. There's his plea. Now, what is he pleading with God with? Hear my prayer, and here's my prayer. I've got a complaint against the sons of men. They're doing these 3 things, and I need you to do something about it. All right? Now, that seems to be how we interpret, that's how we would outline verse 1, David's plea. Verse 2, David's complaint. Verse 3, I think, begins David's message to the sons of men. Here's his message. Now, this message, is it directed towards them, or is this David simply talking to God about the situation? Hey, Lord, I'm upset about these people, and here's what I wish they would do. And then look, he wished that they would stand in awe, sin not, commune with their own heart upon their bed, and be still. He wishes that they would, instead of turning his glory into shame, instead of, seeking vanity and loving lies and pursuing lies, he wished in opposition to that, or in contrast to that, that they would do this. Let's see here, verse. Oh wait, I get verse 4. I'm sorry, verse 3. Verse 3. I jumped to verse 4. I apologize. To verse 3. I apologize. So let's go through this again. Number 1, we have David's plea. He pleads for 2 things. Number 2, I hate when I mess up. Number 2, we have David's complaint. Then starting in verse 3, his message to the sons of men. Now, I think he's speaking to God about this. So what he's saying is, Lord, here's my complaint. And you know what I wish they would do? I wish that they would know that the Lord has set apart him that is godly for himself, and that the Lord will hear when I call unto him. Now, we could talk about, it just seems weird that he would be he's asking God to hear him, and then all of a sudden he just stops talking to God. That doesn't make any sense. So only way I can understand this, he's talking to God and saying, Lord, here's what I wish these people would understand. Here's what my message would be to these people. I want them to understand that the Lord has set apart him that is godly. And I think that's, he wants God to let these people understand that David has been set apart to God. Hey, that they can go around trying to destroy his reputation. They can be pursuing vanity and lies, but God has set David apart for himself. That seems to be what he's doing here. That's the best way I can understand this. And that they need to know that God's going to hear him when he calls unto him. That David is saying, they need to know that, hey, I've asked you to hear me, and David is trusting that you're going to hear me. They need to know that. All right? Then the next thing he wants them to understand in verse 4 is this. He wants them to tremble and do not sin. When you are on your bed, search your hearts and be silent. Don't sin by letting anger control you. Think about it overnight and remain silent. These are all different translations. Be angry and do not sin. Ponder in your own hearts on your beds and be silent. Verse, the Berean Study Bible. Be angry yet do not sin. On your bed, search your heart and be still. Stand in awe, sin not, commune with your own heart upon your bed and be still. Now, there's lots of questions of what we do with this verse. Do we understand verse 4 and 5 to continue his message to the sons of men? Or does David start speaking to himself in verse 4 and 5? Right? We talked about all of this, but I'm just trying to go through this again, all right? I'm trying to hurry. I'm trying to go as quickly as I can. If we read this way, verse 4, this would continue his message to the sons of men. And the message would go like this, all right? Hey, how long are you going to love glory and shame? How long are you going to love vanity? How long are you going to seek after leasing? Right? So there you have it. How long are you going to do this? This is his complaint against them because they continue to do this. He wants them to know that the Lord has set apart him that is godly. That would be David. He set him apart, and that he's going to hear his prayer. All of that seems to be directed at the sons of men. Now, when we get to verse 4, does David stop speaking to the sons of men and speak to himself? Is David telling himself, tremble, sin not, commune with his own heart upon his bed, and be still? does David stop talking to the sons of men and revert back to himself. All right. And then verse 5, offer the sacrifices of righteousness and put your trust in the Lord. Is verse 4 and 5 David now speaking to himself? Or is verse 4 and 5 David still talking to God in regards to the sons of men? There's two ways of looking at this. Again, if we go back to the way verse 4 is translated and a number and other translations, tremble. Some have it translated, be angry. Be angry. So is he telling himself, be angry, be upset about what these people are doing, but do not sin. Do not sin. Do not sin when you're on your bed, and search your heart and be silent. Is this David's message to himself? Now that kind of, to me, changes the whole, changes the interpretation. And I'm thinking maybe that I'm kind of talking myself into a different way of approaching it. I think originally I was convinced that this was a part of David's message to the sons of men, right? I think this was, and look at it this way. I'm going to go with two different interpretations, and you can tell me what you think. All right, so verse 1, no question, David's plea. Verse 2, no question, David's complaint. Verse 3, let's interpret this as David's message to the sons of men, and David is talking to God about them, and this is what he wants for them. He wants them to know something. He wants them to know that the Lord has set apart him that is godly for himself, that the Lord will hear when he calls unto him. Hey, I want these people to know that God has set me apart to himself, and that he's going to hear me when we pray. Now, when you hear this, when they learn this, you know what I want? I want you to tremble. I want you to be, in a sense, upset, but do not sin. I want you to commune with your own hearts upon your bed and be still. Or as other translations state, I want you to search your hearts. I want you to go ahead and be angry at me, but do not sin. Don't sin by letting anger control you. Think about it overnight and remain silent. Be angry, do not sin. Ponder your own hearts on your beds and be silent. Right? Now, the ESV almost makes it about them. Be angry and do not sin. Ponder in your own hearts, plural, on your beds, plural, and be silent. So the ESV almost goes with that way of understanding it. It would be telling them, look, hey, God has set me apart. God hears my prayers. Go ahead and get angry, but don't sin. And you need to search your own hearts. You need to search your own hearts for why you're so upset. You need to search your hearts for what the issue is. And then the next verse, offer the sacrifice of righteousness and put your trust in the Lord. Hey guys, you know what you need to do? You need to get angry. You need to stop. Don't sin. You need to search your own hearts. And you know what you need to do after you get up out of that bed, after you've searched your own hearts overnight? You need to get up and offer your sacrifices of righteousness and put your trust in the Lord. You need to offer your sacrifices of righteousness, and you need to put your trust in God, that God knows what he's doing by setting me apart and by hearing my prayer. That's what you need to do. Now, if we go the other way, then it would work like this. David's plea, David's complaint, David's message to the sons of men, and David's message to himself. And his message to himself would be, hey, get upset about what these people are doing to you. Do not sin. Don't sin when you're getting upset what these people are doing to you. Search your heart on your bed. Wake up in the morning, offer sacrifices of righteousness, and put your trust in the Lord. That's David's message to himself. So we either have two different ways of outlining this: David's plea, David's complaint, David's message to the sons of men, David's complaint, David's message to the sons of men in verse 3, then verse 4 and 5, David's message to himself. Right? Now, this brings us to verse 6. There be many that say, who will show us any good? Lord, lift thou up thy light of thy countenance upon us. Would this be David's second complaint? David's first complaint is against the sons of men. The second complaint is against those who say, show us any good. Now, these may be people who've seen what the sons of men are doing, and they're like, there's no good around here. There isn't anything good. They're discouraged. They're despondent. So is verse 6 David's second complaint? Maybe. And if it is, then is this prayer? David's once again complaining to the Lord about what's going on. And then is this David's encouragement? Maybe we could call it David's encouragement. And this encouragement would be for those who say there's no good. And what is his encouragement? Lord, lift thou up the light of thy countenance upon us. Hey, Lord, show us and encourage us by showing us your countenance, that our encouragement is found in you. Thou hast put gladness in my heart, and more than in the time that their corn and their wine increased. So he's like, hey, what do we need to do for encouragement? We need to look to God's countenance, and we need to look at the gladness that he has given us. And that gladness is more than their corn and their wine. Who is their corn and wine referring to? I think it goes back to the sons of men. Hey, they're out there doing all these bad things, right? They're turning my honor into shame. They seek vanity. They seek lies. But look at the corn and wine that they get. The corn and wine, they're increasing. They're doing great. You know what? But God can give us more gladness than that. I will both lay me down in peace and keep and sleep, for thou, Lord, only makest me dwell safely. So look to God's countenance, look to the gladness that God provides, and trust in him for safety. Is that his encouragement? So what would we have? We would have David's plea, verse 1. David's complaint, verse 2. David's message to the sons of men in verse 3. Verse 4 and 5 is either continues David's message to the son of men or David's message to himself. Verse 6 would be David's second complaint, and then David's encouragement, and part of verse 6, part of verse 7, and part of verse 8. Now, that's really digging in. Now, you can tell me where you disagree. You can tell me how you would interpret it. But I say all of that, and now I'm going to go to what Twyla did, right? Because Twyla went to work on this. Twyla went to work here, all right? Here we go. If I can find it. Twyla sent me this. Psalm 4. Psalm 4 is an awesome psalm, exclamation point. Well, that already encouraged me because that means she spent some time with it. That's wonderful. Here's her outline. Verse 1, Psalm 4:1, the prayer. Have mercy on me, O God, and hear my prayer. Right? Called it the prayer. Verse 2, Psalm 4:2, the questions to the Son of Man. How long will you turn my glory to shame? How long will you love vanity and seek after lies? Verse 3, I'm sorry, I'm going to do this again. Number 1, Psalm 4-1, the prayer. Number 2, Psalm 4, verse 2, the questions to the Son of Man. Number 3, Psalm chapter 4, verses 3-5, the message to the sons of men. Right? The message to the sons of men. Now, this, do we go verses 3-5 as being messages to the Son of Men, or do we possibly turn that as to part of that's the message to the Son of Man, and part of that is a message to David to himself? You can weigh in on all of this yourself. All right. Then number 4, the doubt of many. Psalm 4:6. Whoever these people are, they doubt that, is anyone ever going to show us any good? Is there any good out there? And they seem to doubt that there's any good out there. Number 5, she has joy. And number 6, she has peace and sleep. So that's kind of her outline. A little different than mine, but that's okay. She says she looked up Ephesians 4:23-26, and it was neat to look at it in light of Psalm 4, because Ephesians 4:23-26 reads, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind, and that you put on the new man, with which after God is created in righteousness and true holiness. Wherefore put away lying, speak every man truth with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. Be ye angry and sin let not the sun go down upon your wrath. That is an interesting cross-reference. She goes on to say, I really think it works and makes sense to look at this as a prayer and talking things out to himself and to God and not David speaking directly to the sons of men. I agree. I just don't think there's, hey, Lord, hear my prayer. Okay, now I'm done praying. All right, hey, sons of men, come here. I got a message to you. No, it seems like, hey, Lord, hear my prayer. Look, I need to talk to you about the sons of men. I've got some issues here. I need you to hear my complaints about two groups of individuals. All right. I think that works out. I told her, great work on the psalm. It is definitely an interesting psalm. I think I agree that it only makes sense that with David talking things out to himself with God. Twyla said, thanks. Yeah, I think that makes the most sense. What is the rest of your outline through verses 6 through 8? All right. And again, this is the way it's supposed to work. See, I gave part of the work. She did part of the work. She asked me questions. This creates exhortation and encouragement. This is the way it's supposed to work. I told her that I keep struggling with what to do with verse 6. Verse 6 obviously mentions possibly another group of people who seem to be pretty discouraged. The psalmist offers possibly three answers: God's countenance, gladness, and safety. All three are found in God. He's the source of the gladness. He's the source of it's his countenance, and he's the one who provides the safety. Goodness is found on in God's countenance. The gladness found in God. The safety found in him as well. So do we have the question in verse 6 and then the answer in verses 6 through 8? I don't have a good answer. I do feel every outline I saw on commentaries definitely don't reflect what is actually in the text. Twyla said, yeah, verse 6 is hard. It kind of felt out of place, like a new thought or something. I thought I kept reading it and verse 7 over and over, like, how does this fit in here? And I agree. It does seem like, wait a minute, what? We still have the sons of men. Are already done with them, or what's going on? I said, I think it was another group of people. Maybe there are people who have also had to deal with the sons of men. They seem like they feel there isn't any good to be found. So I think maybe these are some people who are also discouraged by the sons of men. Twyla said, yeah, I think that's a good possibility. I will keep thinking on it. I said, thank you for working on it and sharing everything here. And then someone says, and then Twyla said, it confuses me in verse 7 that he switches pronouns. Thou hast put gladness in my heart more in the time that their corn and their wine increase. Who is there? Who is the there? Is it the people in 6? I think it's the sons of men. If he's trying to answer the people in verse 6 who can't find goodness anywhere, then verse 7 wouldn't make any sense referring to them, since corn and wine increase would be a good thing. However, if he's referring to the sons of men who seem to be causing all the issues, that would make sense. So that is how we approached it. And now I've offered even an alternative interpretation for verses 4 and 5. Now, you can tell me what you think. Now, to add to this discussion, we're going to listen to a sermon. I'm not going to listen to it. We're going to review, analyze, and critique a sermon that was preached. What church is this? From Los Angeles Reformed Presbyterian Church. Los Angeles Reformed Presbyterian Church. And the reason we picked this one is simply because it's the first one that showed up on the Edify Christian podcast app. That's what we're going to use. I don't know where this is going. It's not very long. It's 20 minutes. How in the world you could do a sermon on Psalm chapter 4 in 20 minutes is beyond my comprehension, because I've spent 34 minutes just going back through the text and offering even a second interpretation to some of these verses. Let's see where they go. We'll only go for a few minutes and just see if they offer an outline or offer anything and then we may come back to this in a part 3. Let's just jump in and see where we end up.
To the choir master with stringed instruments, a psalm of David. Answer me when I call, O God of my righteousness. You have given me relief when I was in distress. Be gracious to me and hear my prayer. O men, how long shall my honor be turned into shame? How long will you love vain words and seek after lies? But know that the Lord has set apart the godly for himself. The Lord hears when I call to him. Be angry and do not sin. Ponder in your own hearts on your beds and be silent. Offer right sacrifices and put your trust in the Lord. There are many who say, who will show us some good? Lift up the light of your face upon us, O Lord. You have put more joy in my heart than they have when their grain and wine abound. In peace I will both lie down and sleep. For you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety. So we have a psalm that is well known to many of us. I'm sure there's some here on our meeting that either had this psalm or some version of this psalm sung to them as children before bed, or they sang it to their children at times before bed, or if you had a more traditional church structure where the Lord's Day ended with a late service, maybe a 7 p.m. service. Sometimes this would be the doxology or the closing psalm for worship as people prepared to go home and go to bed and prepare for the week ahead of them. Many of us know it as a psalm that is valuable as a lullaby, something that is sung before bed. Now I'd like to look at it together and note a few things as we look at it. And the first thing that is worth noting is that, again, the psalm has a superscription. The superscription reads, to the choir master with stringed instruments, a psalm of David. This is, again, a psalm that David has written, and in its context, it was to be sung with instruments. We don't know what direction there was outside of that, but we know that it was written with the choir master or the chief musician in mind when the psalm was written. And the psalm is divided nicely with that word Selah. Remember, the word Selah is a musical term, but it's also a theological term. It's a rest, but it's also a rest where we are going to pause and we are going to meditate on what is said. It's not just a pause and catch your breath and start singing again, but it's pause, meditate, reflect on that which we've heard. Think about this. Let it get into your soul and then continue again. We don't always divide psalms along the Selahs, but we do want to acknowledge when they're there and pause. The first division in the text is verses 1 and 2. And you'll notice that verses 1 and 2.
I'll stop right there. He seems to group verses 1 and 2. And in my outline, I think you have to separate them. Verse 1 is the plea, hear my prayer, Lord. Hear my prayer and show me that past mercy. You remember in the past where you enlarged me when I was in distress? I need the same thing. All right. So here's my prayer. Now you could argue, I guess you could do this, that, verse 1 is he's asking for God to hear him. Verse 2. So if I don't think verse 1 would be verse 1 would have, I guess it would be prayer. I guess you could do this. Verse 1 is prayer. So what does he pray? He prays for God to hear him. It's interesting in praying to God, hear me, but it makes sense. He's talking to God. So he prays for God to hear him. He prays for God to show him past mercy. And he prays to God about the sons of men. So you could break it down that way. That would make sense. You could break it down that way. I just see verse 2 as the complaint, but the complaint, if it's given to God, which I say it is, it would be a part of the prayer. So you could do that. You could break it down that way now that I'm thinking about it. See, that's why we listen to other people work through a text, because it challenges our past perception. That's why you always have to constantly be studying and listening, right? So let's see how else he breaks this down.
2 is a prayer for help. It starts with a prayer. Hear me when I call, O God of my righteousness. You have given me relief when I was in distress. Have mercy upon me and hear my prayer. O you men, how long will you turn my glory into shame? How long will you love vanity and seek after vanity or false things? So there's this prayer for help that the psalmist gives, and that begins with this plea, answer when I call. This is something that we're able to bring before the Lord in our prayers.
Please note, he just referred to verse 1 as a plea. He just referred to it as a plea. So I think it's David's plea. Yes, it is a prayer, but it's almost like, Lord, I'm coming to you. Please hear me. Please do. Give me the mercy of the past and the present. Please. Now, Lord, here's my complaint. Now, again, you could argue that all of that is a prayer. You could. But if verse 1 and 2 is a prayer, then what is he going to do with verse 3? Let's see. But I find it interesting. He just referred to verse 1 as a plea, because there is a plea there. There's no way to get around verse 1 as being a plea. It's David's plea. It's David's complaint. Both are part of his prayer. So again, you could break it down that way.
You know, at times it seems as though God does not answer our prayers, and we can begin our prayers in this way. Lord, answer when I call you. This is something that I'm in need of. And we know that if the psalm is connected in any way to Psalm 3, which, remember, I've told you to not put too much into the order as far as historical order, but we know that there is something here where David again is in trouble. Again, he's struggling, and he's saying, Lord, answer when I call. Now, why is David able to do that? Or why would me, as your pastor, why would I encourage you to boldly come before God and say, Lord, answer when I call upon you? Well, David tells us that too, doesn't he? He says, answer when I call, O God of my righteousness. Why is David righteous? It's not anything within himself. David is righteous because God has given him righteousness.
Now, I think there's a problem there. We talked about this in part 1. I think that's incorrect. I don't think David is saying, God, you are my righteousness. I think he's saying, you are my righteous God. Lord, you are righteous. So I'm going to come to you, and I'm imploring you based off you being a righteous God, because you do right, that I need you to help me in this wrong situation. I need your help. I think he's imploring that God is righteous, not that God is David's righteousness. I think if you look at all the translations and the language there, I think that's somewhat incorrect the way that's being handled. But this is the problem. He's only got 14 minutes left. When you're only going to preach for 20 minutes, you don't have any time to deal with any of these translation and textual issues. You're just moving through it. That's the problem with short sermons. I know the people in the pew love short sermons, but if you love short sermons, I'm going to just be very blunt. If you love short sermons, it's because you don't care about truth. Because taking the text apart and doing it in a truthful way is going to require time, effort, and it's going to require working through the text. And here he's not trying to work through. Look, if he just looks up multiple translations, he'll realize not everyone translates it that way. There's a reason why.
And because of that, which we call imputed righteousness, it's been put on David. Because of that righteousness that comes from outside, Luther's fun term, alien righteousness, that righteousness that comes from outside, David then is able to come and to have access to the throne room of grace. That's what the author of Hebrews says. We're able to come boldly to the throne of grace. And this is what David is doing here in Psalm 4. He comes asking for God for relief, and he does it on this basis of the foundation that he is righteous. and he is righteous because God has given him that righteousness. Now, the psalm goes on and it says that you have given me relief when I was in distress. There's really, in Hebrew, this is a really vivid phrase. It's, you have enlarged me, or you have made me big in times of distress. So there's a foe, an adversary that comes before David, and the Lord himself has made David big. The Lord has made him enlarged as a way of protection. You know, we can think of all sorts of animals or teenage boys that do this. You know, you could think of a cat. If you scare a cat and its hair stands on end, it will look quite significantly larger than it is. Or if you've ever gone to the Arboretum to look at the beautiful flowers and you see the peacocks walking around trying to impress all of the peahens, what they do is they enlarge themselves and they strut around and they show the other males how strong and big they are, and they also use that to impress the ladies. And this is sort of the language that's here. You have made me big in distress. You have enlarged me.
Now that's interesting. I did not quite see it that way. You've made me big. In distress, you've made me big. The Hebrew word here, if you want to know, the Hebrew word here for enlarged me is this.
Strong's H7337, Rachav, Rachav.
Rachav, however I can't make those sounds. All right, it means, Strong's definition, to broaden, literally or figuratively, be and make large, make room, make open wide. So it can be large, but it can make open and wide. The usage, the outline of biblical usage, to be or grow wide, to be or grow large, to be widened, to be enlarged, broad or roomy pasture, to make large, to enlarge. So it's used 25 times, enlarge 18 times, 3 times wide, 2 times large, make room. So is it like, hey, you made me large, or is it that I was in distress and you widened the situation where I could get out? There's a lot of questions we could have about there. But we could argue about that, but let's make sure we understand what's being said here. Lord, hear me and do for me in the present what you've done for me in the past. Have mercy on me in the same way. That seems to be the plea here. Hear me and do what you've done for me in the past in this current situation. And what is this current situation? The sons of men. That is the current situation.
When I am in distress, and the word distress is the same word that we would have for affliction or foes or adversaries. It's the Lord protecting David in the midst of this. And then in verse 2, David uses the term sons of men. And this is a term that deals with rank or position. You'll see in the ESV, I believe that is footnoted. It says, "O men," and there's footnote 1, and footnote 1 will tell you that these are sons of men, or these are mighty men, men of rank or men of position. So David is here acknowledging that his affliction comes from the hand of men of power and of influence. These men are turning honor into shame. They're promoting lies. They're promoting empty words. So what's David going to do about this? We see there's the Selah, so we want to rest, we want to reflect and meditate, and then we move into verses 3 and 4 that give us these great contrasts. All
right, so it sounds like in his outline he's going to group 3 and 4. I would think you would have to group 3 and 5. No, 3, But know that the Lord has set apart him that is godly for himself. Okay. Yeah. Okay. We'll see. Because three is verse 2 is his complaint. Is verse 3. So I guess you could go verse 3, 4, and 5. Is 3, 4, and 5, do we group them together as David's message to the sons of men? In other words, hey, Lord, this is what I want the sons of men to know, because I believe David is talking to God about all of this. Or is 3, 4, and 5 David's message to himself? So I guess there's three different ways to go there. So in other words, 3 David's message to the sons of men, verse 4 and 5 David's message to himself, or is 3, 4, and 5 all a message to David himself, or is verse 3, 4, and 5 all a message to the sons of men? Right. So there's a lot of different ways of breaking that down. All right, here we go.
Contrasts that are there, David says, but know that the Lord has set apart the godly for himself. The Lord hears when I call to him. Be angry and do not sin. Ponder on your own hearts, on your beds, and be silent. Offer right sacrifices and put your trust in the Lord. So the godly have been set apart by God himself for himself. This is his delight. And despite the hardships that David's in, despite the hardships of those who are coming against him, David takes comfort and security in this fact. The Lord hears when we call on him. You see that? That's the end of verse 3. David says, I know this. I know the Lord has set apart the godly for himself, and the Lord hears when we call on him. So he began the psalm saying, Lord, answer when I call. And now he's saying, I know the Lord answers when I call. The Lord hears when we call on him.
So I guess he's interpreting 3 as David speaking to himself. So David is like, hey, Lord, hear me. Right? Here's my prayer. Hear me. My prayer is that you'll hear me, that you'll have mercy upon me like you've done in the past, and that you'll hear my complaint about the sons of men. But, okay, now he's going to stop praying. Now he stops praying, and then he's like, okay. Now, David, you need to remember that the Lord has set apart him that is godly for himself, and you're one of those people, and that you need to know that he's going to hear you when you call unto him. So now does David stop praying and immediately turn and starts talking to himself? When he says, but no, who is he referring to? But no, is he immediately stopped talking to the sons of men and starts talking to himself? Is he stopped referring to the sons of men? These are the kinds of questions you should have.
And then verse 4, he says, be angry and do not sin. Ephesians 4:26, this is quoted in the New Testament. The Apostle Paul gives this encouragement to not let the sun go down on our anger. And the word for anger here is, again, descriptive. Remember, I've said to you before that Greek and Hebrew are different in that Greek is very precise, like with using an X-Acto knife, and Hebrew is very descriptive. It paints big word pictures. The word angry is the image of one who is trembling. You know, you can just see he's so angry that he's shaking. And this is the word that is used here. Now, what I want you to notice is...
All right, now, who would be angry? Is he telling himself, get angry at what they're doing? It seems to me that why would you be angry in verse 4? In verse 3, you just told yourself God has set you apart for himself and that God's going to hear you. Why would you be telling yourself to get angry in verse 4? It seems that the people who would be mad in verse 4 are people who would be upset that David's been set apart to God and that God's going to hear David. Those were the people who seemed to be upset in verse 4, which would be the sons of men. Hey, sons of men, hey, how long are you going to do all of these things? I got to complain against you. But you know what, Lord? I want the sons of men. You know what I want them to know? I want them to know that you have set me apart to yourself and that you are going to hear me. And let them get angry. Let them get angry. They need to be angry. They need to be upset because this is not going to change because you've done this. But I don't want them to sin, but I do want them to search their own hearts on their own beds and be still. I want them to realize something. I want them to understand what is going on. It just seems weird that David would be like, hey, God has set me apart, the godly for himself. He's going to hear my prayer. Now, David, get upset. Now, David, get angry. That doesn't seem to fit. That doesn't seem to make any sense. I'm having a hard time making that work as David talking to himself there. He seems to be talking to God about the sons of men. That seems to be what's going on here.
David puts this contrast here. He's already said the Lord hears when we call on him. And then he says, be angry and do not sin. Ponder in your own hearts on your beds and be silent.
Now see, please note, the translation he's using uses hearts plural and beds plural. Well, that wouldn't be David telling himself, hey, commune with my own hearts and upon my beds. That would not make any sense. This is David seeming to be talking about the sons of men. Hey, commune with God and commune with your own hearts upon your own beds. Hey, all of you need to be upset, but don't sin. You need to search your own hearts. You go ahead and get upset that God has set the godly apart for himself. Get upset that God has heard me. Get upset, but you need to think about this. That seems to be what David is doing here. And I think he's saying all of this to God. He's talking to God about the entire situation.
Now, here's two different ways that we can approach the conflict. David says you can go to the Lord in prayer, who answers when you call on him, or you can lay on your bed and you can be angry and listen to your heart. Those are very different things, and they result in often very different answers. I'm sure every one of us here has been angry.
Okay, so he's approaching it this way. Hey, when you're dealing with the sons of men, you can deal with it two ways. You can remember that God has set the godly apart for himself, and you can remember that God will hear you. Or you can get upset. But see, this would make no sense. You can get upset, don't sin. You can just commune with your own heart on the bed. In other words, you can lay on the bed and just get upset about it. Or you can pray to God about it. That doesn't even seem to work. He's stand and I'll get upset, tremble, and sin not. So why would he? That wouldn't be like, hey, the right way to do it is pray, or you can just lay in your bed and just get upset. But he's telling them not to sin in their anger. So that it doesn't seem like David is. It seems like David is saying is, hey guys, this is what I want you to know. And you can get upset about it, but don't sin. And you need to really think about what you're doing. And then the very next verse would have them getting up off their bed and offering sacrifices of righteousness and putting their trust in the Lord. Hey, get upset. You can get upset about it. Don't sin. Really think about it and then get up and offer your sacrifices. So I don't know. Let's see where they go. He's only got 7 minutes left, so I don't think he's going to give us great, profound answers here, but at least he's raising some questions.
I know I have, and when we are angry and we do just sit and listen to our heart often does not tell us what to do that's biblical, does it? It often doesn't point us back to the scriptures. But David reminds us that another way is to bring that to the Lord in prayer, because the Lord hears when I call. We're able to be angry and sin not, but that often doesn't happen by listening to the ponderings of our own heart. It happens when we cry out to the Lord.
All right, so he's breaking this verse all apart. So tremble, get upset, sin not, commune with your own heart. But he's interpreting this, get angry, sin not, but commune with your own hearts. But if you do that, you're going to end up getting angry and sinning. Well, because the right way to handle it is to pray. Verse 4 is all one big instruction. Get upset, don't sin, commune with your own hearts upon your bed, and be still. It seems to be all together. It doesn't seem to be like, well, this is one way to handle it in contrast with another way to handle it. No, it seems to be saying, no, this is the way you should handle it. Go ahead and get upset if you're going to, but just don't sin. Really think about it and be still, which then leads to the next verse about getting up and now offering sacrifices that are righteous, because you've really thought about what you're doing and you realize that it hasn't made sense, that no, God has set apart the godly for himself and he's going to hear my prayer. David has to be referring to himself in that previous verse. So he's breaking this down in a way that it's not even following an outline at this point. It's really disjointed, and I'm having a hard time figuring this out. We're at an hour, but we've only got 6 minutes to go, so we've got to finish this.
Who hears prayer. And then there's that Selah. Maybe the question there is, who are you listening to? And then there's answers given. There's answers given in verses 5 through 7. We have 5 through 6, which seem to be an answer to the rebellion of the mighty men. He says, offer right sacrifices, put your trust in the Lord. There are many who say, who will show us some good? Lift up the light of your face upon us, O Lord. So the mighty men, those that are going against the Lord, trust in him, look to him and be saved. Be in the word.
So now he has verse 5 as an answer to the people in verse 2. Well, what is 3 and 4? If 5 refers back to the sons of men, doesn't 3 and 4 have to refer to the sons of men? And how are you going to get up and offer sacrifices unto the Lord? I think the way you're going to end up offering sacrifices unto the Lord is when you go ahead and get upset. Don't sin as you get upset. Really commune with your own heart upon your bed and be still. Really think about this. Really meditate on it. Remember the truth. God has set the godly apart for himself. He's going to hear his prayer. So, hey, guys, you need to stop your turning my glory into shame. You need to stop loving vanity, and you need to stop seeking after falsehood. Really think about this. Really think, because here's the truth. God has set apart the godly for himself. He's going to hear my prayer. So guess what? Go ahead and get upset, but don't sin. Meditate on this. Now get up and offer the sacrifices of righteousness and put your trust in the Lord. It seems like that would all fit together. He's just broke that apart from the others. And he's like, 5 is the answer to the problem, is the answer to the people in 2. Well, what's 3 and 4? I'm having a hard time following his outline here.
There are those that say, who will show us some good? And David sees the answer in living under the benediction of God, living under that blessing.
But who are the people who say, there are many that say, who will show us any good? Are those the same people in 2? Or are these people who are dealing with the sons of men as well? The sons of men are running around causing all of these problems, and there's people going, hey, who's going to show us any good? Who's going to show us? Can someone show us some good? Who could it be? Who could it be? We've got to answer that question. I mean, there's questions in the text you have to answer. If you're going to use this for your Sunday service, come on, at least deal with the text here.
That comes down upon us. The light of God's face is to bring us joy. He says, lift up the light of your face upon us, O Lord. We know that this is the language that comes from Numbers.
Now, who is the us? Who is the us? The us there, I don't think, is the sons of men. The us are those there are those who say, who will show us any good? Who's going to show us any good? And he is saying, let God's countenance, the light of your countenance upon us. David's putting himself there. Hey, he needs to see good because he's dealing with the sons of men. And it sounds like these other people need to see good because they're dealing with the sons of men. These sons of men seem to be causing a lot of problem. That's the only way it seems to make any sense there.
The benediction and living under that good word of God, that blessing of God, where his light does shine down upon us and his face looks towards us. This is something that is going to cause you and me to lift our countenance. And what a contrast to the distress that David is currently living under. He knows that he needs to put himself under the benediction of God. That benediction, of course, comes through the mediator of the new covenant, who is Jesus Christ, even as David would look ahead. So we find joy there. We find joy in the heart. And that's what verse 7 says, that this is a response. You have put more joy in my heart than they have when their grain and their wine abound, or their new wine abound. So David is confessing that, in times of abundance.
Now, who's their wine and their corn? Who's he referring to? It cannot be referring to the people who are saying, who will show us any good? Because if their wine and corn is increasing, that would be considered good. So it sounds like, hey, you know what? The sons of men are causing all the trouble. Yeah, I know everything seems to be going great with them. Their wine and their corn is increasing. But you know what? In God and in his countenance, we can find a gladness that comes from God. So hey, you want to see good? Look to God's countenance. You want to see good? Look to the gladness that comes from God. You want to see good? Remember the safety that is found in him. That seems to be the answer to this second, well, I think I called it in my outline a second complaint. I take that back. I don't think I want to call it a second complaint, because David's not complaining about these people. David is, let's do this. I'm gonna work on this again. All right. So number one, David's plea. That's in verse 1. He pleads for two things: for God to hear him and for God to show him past mercy in the present. Number two, David's complaint, which would be the complaint against the sons of men and all their problems. Verse 3, 4, and 5 seems to be David's message to the sons of men. I think David's message to himself. I just don't think that works. Verse 6, we could go verse 6 through 8. David's encouragement. He wants to encourage those who are like, where's there any good? I don't think it's David's not complaining about these people. David is seeking to encourage those people. I made a mistake there, and I apologize. But I'm trying to work this out. Remember, Bible study exercise. I'm trying to take you through the process in real time. So that's the way this is supposed to work. I think that's David's encouragement in verses 6 through 8. And he's encouraging those who are like, come on, is there any good anywhere to be found? And I think their corn and their wine refers to the sons of men in verse 2. Right now, I think that makes some sense.
Of grain and times of abundance of wine, these are things that are joyful in life. And yet the Lord's countenance being placed upon him is something that is going to even bring greater joy. And again, the Apostle Paul uses that idea in the New Testament as well, where he says to not be drunk with wine, but be filled with the Spirit. That contrast between wine and the Spirit is made frequently in the Scriptures, wine pointing us to the things of God that we find within the Spirit of God. And then he concludes with verse 8 with peace and safety. So sleep and peace come together in the closing verse. Remember, I opened the conversation or the teaching with saying that for many this is a lullaby. Many have been sung to sleep with this psalm. And he says, in peace I will both lie down and sleep. For you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety. David understands that he serves a sovereign God who is going to bring whatsoever he will to pass. Now, remember, David is not in a safe situation. We wouldn't look at David in this where there's mighty men coming against him and say, oh, you're safe, David. You're fine. You're safe. But David understands that under the blessing of God, under the benediction of God, under the sovereign will of God, that he's safe, and he's able to lie down in peace and sleep. The Puritan John Flavel said, David resolves that sinful fears of events shall not rob him of his inward quiet, nor torture his thoughts with anxious pressings. He will commit his concerns into the faithful fatherly hand that has wrought all things for him, and he means not to lose the comfort of one night's rest, nor bring the evil of tomorrow upon the day, knowing in whose hand he wisely enjoys the sweet felicity of a resigned will. Now this tranquility of our mind is as much begotten and preserved by a due consideration of providence as by anything whatsoever. So David just saying, I'm resting in the Lord. This is not an easy, safe situation, but I find peace and I find safety in it because God is sovereign and God is good and God is the one who has made promises unto his people. And I think there's a lot of encouragement in that for us as well. We can look to Jesus Christ and we know that we are trusting in him, and we know that because we trust in him, we are given that bold access to the throne room of grace where we're able to bring our concerns and our problems and our cares. We're not required to just resolve to lay on our bed and try to figure things out on our own. We don't have to just listen to our heart, but instead we're able to bring those things before God, and we're free to be angry. We're free to, use any emotion that God has given us, and yet without sin. That's what David says here. And we trust in the Lord. We trust in his hand that he will guide and that he is the one that will give peace, that sense of shalom, that perfect peace that comes from resting in him. And he is the one that gives safety. So I think the psalm is very encouraging, and it's a great way to end a Wednesday night with singing it as well.
Okay, I guess it was a Wednesday night service. It's listed as a Sunday service. So it's listed incorrectly. So it's a Wednesday service. But whether it's a Wednesday or whether it's a Sunday, 20 minutes and 8 seconds, he did not deal with a lot of the issues in the text. I've given you different ways to understand it. I apologize for saying that verse 6 should be possibly a second complaint. That doesn't make any sense. David is not complaining about these people. He's encouraging those people. So I completely messed that up. I apologize. I want to delete this now, but I'm not going to delete it because a Bible study exercise is where I'm trying to take you through the text in real time. So, and I was trying to offer different interpretations and offering different perspectives. So that perspective was incorrect. I apologize. I'm going to leave this here anyway. Hopefully it was okay. Hopefully this was beneficial, and we'll see if it sparks more discussion. We may have to come back to do this one more time, and if we do, then I'll clean it up, and instead of doing a Bible study exercise, I'll just do a straight teaching on Psalm 4 and then approach it in a different way. So, there you have it. Let me know what you think. You can email me at newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com, and let me know if this was beneficial. That would be greatly encouraging. It's been a long day, and it's 80 degrees in this building right now because I did not want to turn on the air conditioning, but I should have, because about halfway through this, I felt like I was going to pass out. I'm literally sweating. Yeah, I could have turned on the air conditioner, but our electric bill has been crazy in the church, so I'm trying to save the church some money. So, which I think just greatly hindered my ability to teach. When you're sweating, it's very difficult to focus on. And maybe David's complaint in verse 6 was really my complaint that, hey, Trevor, you moron, just go turn on the air conditioner. You wouldn't be sweating. But I'm going to go home. That's what I'm going to go do. So I hope this was beneficial. If it was all messed up and I should delete it, please let me know that because I got no problem. I will delete it because it's been a long day. All right, I'll stop right there. Thanks again to Twyla. You did exactly what I asked. That's what these Bible study exercises are supposed to do. That back and forth I had with her was super encouraging to me, hopefully encouraging to her. We exhorted one another with the scriptures, trying to figure them out. She spent extra time in the scriptures. I spent extra time in the scriptures because of her. And because of her, we've all spent extra time in Psalm chapter 4. That's the way it's supposed to work. Feel free to participate whenever you can, because that's the way we want the Bible study exercises to work, and hopefully we will have more success with them moving into the future. All right, thanks to everyone for listening. Everyone have a great Friday night. God bless.